Hello friends, Mr. E here, Crown Prince of the Third Monitor, Lord of the Yap. It is time to talk balance Yaptide. We have a lot to discuss with the recent, rather large and surprise changes that have dropped to Darktide, namely patch 1.11.6 that brought the nerfs to Ogryn enemy numbers like Crushers, etc., as well as to Uncanny Strike and a few different blitzes in the game, among other things. But I also want to, of course, talk about sort of where the state of the game is going into this sort of change, where fatshark is in sort of telegraphing that they're headed with this, and of course what I think they should be the next steps if they are really going to walk the walk and not just talk the talk here. But my bigger point today, the more large-scale meta picture that I want to convince you of, my argument is that Darktide is fighting against ENSLOPPIFICATION. This attempt, what they are essentially going to attempt to do here is to de-escalate the game and to return it to a more stable and more readable, more manageable state. And right now, you might not have noticed it, but I have, and I've been beating the drum about this for a while. Darktide and its combat have become, in no small means, incoherent, unintelligible slop. Right, there is so much going on at any given moment in a combat, especially if you are entering into Auric or Havoc difficulties, that you are inundated. There are so many enemies attacking and swarming around you all the time. There is really no room to play the game and learn the fundamentals and play with the fundamentals that make playing Darktide or a Tide game really work, right? If you played Vermintide 2, you probably know what I'm talking about, and you can tangibly feel the difference. On the highest difficulties of Cataclysm, and plus in Vermintide 2, you still must adhere to the core concepts of gameplay, aiming for headshots, hitting breakpoints, dodging appropriately, blocking, space management and positioning against enemies. That sort of stuff is still of utmost importance, and more importantly than that is the enemies that you're facing give you the room to actually engage with them in that way, right? When you're fighting 3 Chaos Warriors, you are fighting those 3 Chaos Warriors, and there might be a couple of other enemies poking at you, but in modern day Darktide, when you're fighting 3 Crushers, you're also fighting 15 small gunners and the endless chain of trappers, and of course, whatever the fuck else, the 2 pox bombers who are throwing from the next county over to just completely bathe the area in gas, and you're about to get chain CC'd by a mutant into a flamer, etc., etc. The list goes on. And that sort of stuff, just being completely saturated with enemies and just non-stop go all the time, has broken down the core gameplay of the game. You no longer really interact with enemies, or you can choose to interact with enemies, but the best ways, the most effective ways to play the game have become sloppified, and I'll be demonstrating that a little bit later on. But for now, let's start with just the basics of what has fatshark said about the issues, and do I agree, and where they look like they're going to be going from here. And by the way, this is of course going to be a longer video because it's a Yaptide sort of thing. It is a third monitor appropriate, podcast style appropriate if you want to watch it that way. There's probably going to be one time where I'll have something on the screen that I'll make certain to flag down in case you want to see it. But other than that, just enjoy the dulcet sounds of my voice. And if you really enjoy the dulcet sounds of my voice, consider becoming a channel member, because there is quite a bit of good yap on there to be had, and much more to come. And also a super big appreciative thank you to my best friends, Elise, Neva, and Sai. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. I love you. Mwah. Okay, let's get underway here, and let's first talk about what fatshark said in their dev blog from a week and some change ago, about 10 days ago, where they were teasing dropping this patch, which has been in the game for about a week. And this 2 paragraphs right here are really, really important, and I think are pretty much dead on. And a lot of times I disagree with fatshark's takes on their own game, but this says to me that they see the issues that I have seen for a while. So that bodes really well. So let me just kind of read, and I'll paraphrase and give my thoughts here. Over time, as we've expanded and improved weapons, talents, and introduced new classes, the overall player power has increased in the game. To maintain the intended difficulty, we've increased the enemy density and spawn rate of elites, and while this has kept the game intense, it has also introduced new challenges for us. So yes, I 100% agree. Our power as players has crept up. We introduced Arbites, and then we topped that by upgrading all the other classes, and then we topped that by introducing Hivescum, buffing him 5 times, to the point where Arbites, when he once was considered like the most powerful class in the game, just unga bunga face roll through everything, he now is in like the lower bracket of classes, and that isn't because 3 of his 15% damage nodes were nerfed to be 10% damage. It's because everybody else leapfrogged him, and the game also just kind of like exploded in terms of difficulty. And that's the second part they say here. In order to maintain the intended difficulty, they've increased enemy density and spawn rate of elites. Now, if you've been playing for about a year, you 100% have noticed this, especially to me. One thing they didn't mention here is specials. Holy shit. The amount of specials you will face in a game now has exploded. It went from spawning a wave of 4 specials at a time on Auric difficulty to 3 waves of 4 specials at a time. So you are now like facing like Trapper, 2 mutants, 3 bursters, like all in a line, and then like there's 2 pox bombers throwing on you, and just like everything's fucking going on, and you're just non-stop just being harassed by these fucking things, and you have to give all your attention to them, and it's just crazy. Like there's no breathing room, and they have to do that, right? They have to do that in order to keep players challenged, because players can kill so fast. And the real problem, as they say here, they've got a couple of issues, and they really only mentioned one, but I've got a couple more they really aren't saying. When they are making this enemy count so high, of course it impacts performance and stability. But this has more impacts on this right here. When they are relying on adding more elites enemies and more special enemies, what it does is it stratifies the game. It narrows down the range of effective player loadouts. It also narrows down the effective range of like characters, right? Because the characters that were already strong into elites and specials, like Psychers, like the Veteran, right? These guys have maintained relevance and excelled because they had no problem killing like, 5 trappers before if the game had thrown that many at them. But like the poor Ogren, think about how he feels when now that they're, instead of just 1 mutant, there's 3 that are going to chain CC him and beat his ass to death in the 4 flamers that just showed up, right? That has made the game so much harder for the classes that already struggled against this stuff. And of course, it's done the same thing with weapons. The best weapons at removing crushers, etc., have been, of course, made a little bit worse by the crushers getting the buff to their HP, etc. But every other weapon that wasn't that good at crushers has been made even worse. Like, they have really, really gotten hurt by this. Fuck off of OneDrive. So that's like the biggest thing here, is that, yeah, you can increase the difficulty of the game in this way, but it really fucks with like the lesser players more, right? The lesser types of builds more. And that's what they want to kind of get away from. They want to sort of address these balance issues in a way that favors the already existing OP stuff, right? And here's the problem. If you noticed here, this is as a result of a sort of a concept of balancing that is buff only. And this is foolish. This is something that has been caused by fatshark being cowed by a vocal minority of the community. It started as early as the power sword or nerfs, like back a couple months after the game's launch, and I have it on authority from playtesters at the time that actually changed the development and the buffs and nerfs they would give to weapons. They basically were given the mandate no nerfs for some time after that, because the game started to get review bombed on Steam as a result of people crying about their fucking power sword. And that entitlement has led the devs to avoid using one whole half of their arsenal to combat the balance issue. More or less, they've been trying to balance a scale with both sides being uneven, stacking a little bit of weight on the player side, stacking a little bit of weight on the enemy side, and you can never get it quite even, right? But all you're doing is you're adding more and more weight, and eventually the fucking scale is going to crash through the floor, because the structure of the game fundamentally can't support all this, and it's just going to turn into a huge fucking mess, which is kind of where we're headed. And hopefully what we can do is, now that they've remembered that it's their fucking game and they can nerf shit if they want to, we can start to remove some weight from each side, right? We can take some crushers off, but we're also going to take some buffs. We're going to take some of your grenades. We're going to take some of your really OP blessings, right? And then we're going to take some more and more. And eventually we can get back to a place where there's manageable weights on both sides of the scale, and we can both buff and nerf. We cannot buff only. I'm sorry to say, if you're still in that cohort of players, I think most of those people have sort of like gone their own way, right? That's sort of more of a casual opinion. If you've been playing the game for any amount of time, if you're invested in the game, you understand there's stuff that definitely needs to be brought down and brought in line. And then there's other stuff that needs to be brought up. We cannot just buff, because then we end up in a situation where, I mean, if you're still in that camp, right, how you liking rotten armor? Right? How do you enjoy rotten armor being shoved down your fucking throat? How are you enjoying, a trapper followed by another fake out trapper and then 3 quantum entangled bursters that jump on you at one time that are literally unpushable, right? How do you enjoy the game crashing constantly and having completely fucked frame rates because there's so much going on? That is as a direct result of this buff only mentality. So we have to get away from that. And fortunately, that's what seems like fatshark is eager to do here. So yeah, we're going to be preserving the intensity of the combat, hopefully, right? While making it more stable, more readable, that's one I'll come back to here in a second, and more supportive of different builds and loadouts. And this means toning down the most extreme of enemy scenarios while also addressing a small number of player power outliers that have been shaping our encounter design. So they started with that, with Uncanny Strike and a couple of grenades this week. Of course, we'll touch on the other ones, but this is the one that I really want to focus in on here, right? More readable. So to me, the readability of Darktide currently is next to none. As I mentioned in sort of my preamble to this discussion, I think that Darktide has become more or less unintelligible slop in a lot of combats, where you are not so much reacting to what the enemies are doing, but pre-acting. You are just doing the actions in a sequence, like a rotation, like it's an MMO or something, because that's what you do in order to survive. So let me just give you some examples of this so you can see it when I demonstrate it here in a second. But when you are running from point A to point B, what do you do if you're a high-level player? You don't just run. You are constantly butt sliding. You are constantly scooting your ass all over the place. Why? Because at any given time, if you're playing on Havoc, there are probably like 8 to 10 gunners aiming at you trying to kill you. So you're just sliding everywhere. It's just the de facto thing that you do. And that has become baked into the core of gameplay. What do you do when you're shooting at enemies with like a recon las gun or something like that as a veteran? You are not looking for the enemy's flashes of their guns to dodge in time. You're just spamming dodges left and right. You're just kind of dodging. What do you do when you're in a horde combat? Well, you're slashing, and then every couple of seconds you throw out a shove, because almost certainly there's some enemy who's within your shove radius who's about to take a swing on you, and you make space and you continue slashing. You are not actually reacting to what is going on, what the enemies are actively doing. You are preempting it. You are just saying, okay, there's so much going on at this given time that I must do perform this order of operations in order to stay alive, and then just keep shooting or keep attacking or doing whatever I'm doing. And the other thing this does is it really makes it difficult to play and get value out of high investment builds that require you to aim and be precise and use like weapons specials and really think about your gameplay, because you have so much going on that you kind of need to just kind of dumb everything down. And let me demonstrate that here for you. So here what we're going to look at is 2 clips of my gameplay, playing veteran in both clips, but using different builds. And the first build we're going to look at is what I would consider a non-slopper build, a conventional Darktide sort of build, and it relies on getting headshots, managing my cooldowns, managing spacing, actually using my grenades in a effective way, and watching my positioning, and yeah, just generally like I have to be pretty skilled to pilot this build. There's a lot going on, and yeah, let's just watch how it plays out. How's the gas here? I'm clearly not in the gas. I'm just dead. 50-50. Okay, we scratch. Oh, fuck up! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Grenade! No! I've got a kill! Give me a kill, give me a kill, give me a kill, give me a kill! Thank you. Fuck you. Yeah, gold toughness, baby! Fuck you! Alright, so hopefully what you saw there was, yeah, really kind of popping off in that clip. Clinging to life by the skin of my teeth, but it felt good. And when I did that, it was a very like nice feeling afterwards to actually get to flex my Darktide muscles. And when I went to pull clips for the video, I knew that this was one of the clips that I wanted to use, where I'm actually playing the game, right? I was aiming for headshots, and I was having to, you know, perform like split-second dodges against dogs and all that stuff. So it was all working in concert. It's not perfect, right? But I wanted to point out that combat, like good combat, does still exist in Darktide. However, I think in a much larger respect, we have combat like this. This clip has a different build, but still veteran, and a very similar amount of enemies, I would say, in the engagement, but it feels completely different. And I'll let you be the judge of it. Let's let it roll. I'm gonna throw some grenades, I think. Methinks. I got it. Boys. That works. So I'm certain you noticed that in this gameplay here, my brain is off. Like I am on autopilot. I am basically AFK at the wheel here because I don't need to give a fuck about what's going on. Because I am playing a slopper build. Because this style of gameplay allows me to play sloppy and succeed as much as the build you saw in the previous clip, right? We are able to be victorious in this counter because my team is stacked with slopper styles of builds. I've got the chorus, I've got the taunt, I can throw crack grenades into the vague vicinity of enemies. I mean, look at this gameplay, look at the exhibit of mechanical skill on display here, just randomly throwing grenades, and I'm just gonna blast at kind of chest level. I see these melee enemies come up to me and I just spam dodge randomly a couple times. Good enough, right? Who gives a fuck? Take this Rager attack to the face 3 times, because who gives a fuck? Like, taking damage doesn't matter because gold toughness. All the enemies' AI is turned off for 7 seconds because chorus exists. Right. No one is participating in this fight. There's no... I'm asleep at the wheel. The enemies are literally concussed into non-existence. Nothing matters. This is slop. This is not Darktide combat. This is MMO combat. This is Warframe. This is a dungeon. We are clearing trash. We've got it on farm, right? We are grouping everything up. We are crowd controlling it, and we are AoE blasting it and damage over time, stacking it until it's all dead. And that is such a shame that, like, you know, the core concept of the Tide series is supposed to be that there's these different enemies, and different enemy types elicit different responses and necessitate you to have mechanical skills to know how to counter them, right? But in the vast majority of Darktide gameplay, there's 2 types of enemies, right? There's shooty types and there's melee types. And so you shoot the shooty types, and then when the melee types get close, you crowd control them and then you shoot them or whatever else, right? But everything dies the same way here. Everything dies the exact same way. It is concussed, it is crowd controlled, chain CC'd into non-existence, and then you stack 55 bleed stacks, 55 burn stacks, 55 fries, 55 burgers on it, and then it just dies, and it is exploded by some AoE bullshit nonsense, and that's the way the game is played. And so first and foremost, of course, this looks like slop. This looks terrible. I look like a trash player when I'm playing like this, but I'm winning. That is the second thing here. This way of playing is the winningest way of playing. It is the way that most players are going to gravitate towards playing because 99.9% of players care about one thing above all else, and that is winning and losing. And if you have a build that wins the game, that just trumps all the enemies and haha GG, that is going to be good. There's a reason why players like my builds. It's because they are slobber builds, right? They can put the game on farm. They can automate a good portion of it for you to where you don't need to react or have mechanical skill. You can just stat check the enemies into death. And that's ultimately your decision to make here, right? You can have an experience like this where you just stack burns and bleeds and crowd control one after the other and group everything up and nuke it down, and you can win the game. Or you can have an experience like I had in the previous clip, where you can fight honorably, but in a 30-second period, you are going to be surrounded by horde on all sides. You're going to be attacked by 3 trappers, 2 dogs, 3 ragers, 2 shotgunners, a mutant, and you're going to have 2 pox bombers throwing on you in a 30-second period. Like, that's what the game expects you to deal with right now, and for almost all players, that is too fucking much. So it's no small wonder that they offload a big portion of the overstimulation that the game is absolutely jam-packed with right now, that the like insane level of threat and like the number of enemies that are attacking and engaging with you anytime, there's no small wonder that players choose builds and select weapons and abilities and stuff that neutralize that threat so they can actually make sense of what the fuck is going on, right? Players choose Psyker with Flame Staff and Bubble because Flame Staff removes the 100 horde enemies that are spawning every second. Bubble neutralizes the 15 gunners that are trying to shoot at you at any given period of time. And then Taunt for Ogren, because that actually makes enemies, like, you know, predictably try to attack targets, and you can make sense of what's happening in the battlefield when everything is grouping up around the Ogren and blast it down. You use Chorus because it pauses the game and gives you a second to fucking breathe and think about what is happening. It gives you 7 seconds every 40 seconds or so. The game is just on pause so that you can, like, get your fucking shit together. And that stuff, I'm not saying it's a crutch. I'm not saying it's, like, bad for the game or anything. It's just that, like, the game basically expects it of you at this point. If you're not doing that stuff, you're gonna have to fight 5 times as hard to achieve the same results. And that is the downfall here. That's the real thing that I'm really hoping that fatshark can seek out and reverse. Because to me, I want a reality for Darktide where the highest skill gameplay, like the mechanical knowledge, is incentivized, where that stuff sits at the top, the peak of the game, and can become the winningest sort of gameplay, not this stacking defensive layers, stacking AoE, stacking damage over time on enemies, and then just nuking it all down to the ground. Because that is not Darktide. That is like Warframe. That is an MMO, right? That is just going through the rotation. So take, for example, by the way, just this is you know, another great example of a slop build that I produced at some point, Ogrenheimer, right? This is by definition a slop build, and think about what this character's interaction with enemies is. You taunt everything, you group it up, and then you hit it with the fucking rumbler shot, and 95% of it dies. And then, if anything's left standing, you hit it with the power maul, and now it's all dead. And then you rinse and repeat. And so think about that. Keep that in your mind, right? Keep like how Ogrenheimer plays in your mind, and tell me, how different is Ogrenheimer gameplay to this gameplay? Okay, so, like, this is Warframe, right? This is Zephyr. We have tornadoes that are sucking all the enemies in the area into one spot, and then we're nuking them with the grenade launcher. Seems pretty familiar, right? You don't have to discern what enemies are on the field here. In fact, you know, past a certain point in Warframe, it doesn't even fucking matter. All the enemies are faceless jobbers. There are melee enemies and there are ranged enemies. There's different types, but they all die the same way. They all get blown up by the AoE splash effects. They all get crowd controlled so they can't even play the game, and nuked down by damage over time, yada yada yada. It seems really, really familiar, and this is what I don't want Darktide to be. So The question becomes, in order to avoid this future, in order to step back from the brink of insanity that we are quickly approaching, what does fatshark need to do next? So, of course, this is a really, really difficult one to tackle because 2 reasons. First reason, I mean, the players and the enemies, they are where they are. They are as power-crept as they are because of each other. Because the players are powerful enough to counteract that level of enemies, and the enemies are so numerous to counteract how powerful the players are. So any like fucking with one is gonna leave the other one like way out of whack. If we remove 25% of enemies, well then the game just got so fucking easy and the players are still gods. So yeah, we need to kind of address the situation in tandem. There has to be a stepping down of power on both fronts at the same time. And that is going to mean that we have the second problem, which is that somebody's got to get nerfed. And it's an uncomfortable reality, but just think of it, if you are the a recipient of a nerf, just think of it as a sacrifice for the greater good. Because, removing the outliers, as I said, the player power outliers, those are the things that are driving the necessity of having these arenas absolutely cram-packed and swamped with enemies. Getting rid of that stuff will allow, first of all, other player power options room to be expressed and actually have a role in the game, and it will also free up physical room in the room that you're in, because it won't be 100% crammed wall to wall with like Moby and 21st or whatever. So yeah, I think that the obvious question here is, we know what we're going to do to the enemies, right? We're going to turn down the numbers of elites and specials, and we're going to turn down the quantities in general. But what are we going to do to players? What would be a good first step? What is the biggest outlier that we need to address in order to start to de-escalate these situations? If we want to remove enemies from the game, what should we take from players so that is a imbalance? And my proposal, the first thing that I would target is area of effect. It is everything with a large geometric size that does its effects that way. And I'm not just talking about damage dealers, I'm talking about crowd controllers too. So for a roughly inclusive list, I would say the Flame Staff, the Rumbler, the Taunt, the Venting Shriek, Chorus, Shout, more or less that's it, right? So like that stuff is as impactful as it is because it doesn't matter how much stuff you send at a team who's equipped with those things. You could send 10,000 enemies after the team that has Flame Staff and Chorus and Taunt and Venting Shriek or whatever, right? Because what's going to happen is the Taunt goes off and it grabs 10,000 enemies and it groups them up and they're all trying to get to the ogre, and he's immortal. He's not going to get killed by these little shitter enemies. And then the Flame Staff goes in, starts venting, shrieking out to 15 meters away or however fucking far it is. It's insanely far. And you don't have to get anywhere near close to the engagement, so you're perfectly safe. And then you Venting Shriek. And I don't know exactly what the range is on the cone for Venting Shriek. I think it goes like roughly 1 astronomical unit or so. Like, it just covers the entire fucking map. And it burns everything to death. And then if shit really gets bad and you start to get overwhelmed by the 10,000 enemies, you just press Chorus, and that's 7 seconds during which you get to do whatever you want, and no enemies within any range of you can do anything. And that works irrespective of the number of enemies on the field. And because these operators, the damage dealers, get better when there's more enemies, they do more damage, but they kill an individual enemy just as easily, obviously. And then the crowd control effects are even more important with this many enemies in there. That basically means that running these things makes it like impossible for the game to be difficult with just numbers alone, right? You basically, if you are running these area of effect sort of things, the number of enemies doesn't matter, or it matters way, way less than the difficulty intends it to. However, and you can go try this out for yourself, find a Moby and 21st Havoc 40 game, and then choose classes that have 0 AoE ability, right? Choose like, you know, like Recon Lasgun Veteran, and just a Zealot with a dueling sword, and Charge or whatever, right? Because those classes are gonna have to kill that shit manually, and they have no huge splash zones to delete entire hordes. So what's gonna happen, and you've probably definitely had this happen before, is you'll be drowning in enemies. You will be like, holy shit, I can't fucking move. These hordes are so dense. It's night and day, the difference when you have AoE blasters, DPSers on your team versus when you don't. And the reason the difference is so stark and feels so bad when you don't have that is because the game was designed with the expectation that you do. The game is as dense as it is and prints as many enemies as it does because the expectation in terms of player damage is that you are AoE blasting. So the first obvious step to produce that density is we should reduce the AoEs. We should make them blast less. Let's start with just the AoE like size, like the radius of the cone or the circle or whatever it might be. If we reduce that, you'll be able to hit less enemies at a time, and you'll expose yourself to more of a challenge to get close enough to taunt or suppress with chorus or hit with the flame staff or whatever. And it caps sort of the amount of enemies that can be hit by any of these things. Smaller AoEs like Void Blast obviously don't touch, like what is it? Stim supply, like the stim supply explosion don't touch, right? But I'm talking about the ones that crowd control massive quantities of enemies and just it's incapacitate them or kill them. And like this is of course like a drastic thing. I would say reduce it by a third or whatever. I want to remind Fatshark, and I want to remind you, the viewer, if you're like losing your mind here, that it's their game, 1, and 2, they can just say JK, right? If they fuck something up and it's not good, they can just roll it back. They can just change it back. They literally could hotfix the game every single day. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. They literally put out a surprise, we're going to be updating the game with this balance change, and then like that was on Friday, and on Monday they put it live. Like that's the turnaround that they can do this on, and they could just as easily on Wednesday have turned around and said, never mind, we're adding the crushers back. And that's doable, right? We have the internet. So yeah, like they could do this, and I think that like they should just be going crazy. Pick big numbers and see how it changes the game. And another suggestion that I have, if you are really scared about changing the fundamentals of the game and like scaring away players, which I think that most players are probably fine with just playing with a different balance experience for a few days, but what you could definitely do is test it out on Havoc. You have a cohort of players with Havoc players who more or less have signed a waiver saying, please, like, I am consenting for you to crush my balls. So crush their balls specifically, and then see if that ball crushing has produce the results that we want. See how much it reduces player power overall to cut their AoEs by 33%, and then port it into the main game if it looks like it's working out pretty well, the reduction of enemies and the reduction of AoEs. So that would be my idea. The other one that I think that needs perhaps a look at, it would be the one right behind area effect, would be damage over time. And damage over time effects is obviously something that Fatshark are looking at because they've already nerfed the toxin effect for the Hive Scum. Very, very insane. High ADM versus all armor types, able to melt bosses just like it melts crushers, just like it melts everything. And they have reduced that by like 30%, which is pretty sizable, and it's still good. There are a couple of other damage over time effects in the game, and I think Bleed should probably be left alone, but the two that I am concerned with are Soul Blaze and Fire, which hurts me personally because I love, my fire on my Recon Lasgun with Infernus, or my Ogrin with the fire stacks from the explosions on the Rumbler. Like that stuff, those two types of damage over time effects are exceedingly effective because they are applied generally at range, and they last for a really, really, really long time. Their stacks take an incredibly long amount of time to start falling off, and so they just deal an absurd amount of damage. You just apply it, and then you move on with your life. You do something else. And having damage over time effects be so effective like that and last such a long time and deal so much damage over their lifetimes makes it so hard to balance. Makes it so hard to ascertain what is the player power actually, right? Because there's a big difference between, the psyker who, like, they're fighting the horde in front of them and they're flame staffing it down or whatever, but they could also at the same time just be spreading soul blaze to every enemy within their massive radius and venting, shrieking it, and putting it on other enemies, right? They can have so many enemies cooking at one time that it's really hard to get a grasp on what the upper limit is to their power. Same thing with like Recon Lasgun, right? I'm not shooting enemies until they're dead with the Recon Lasgun. I'm shooting them until they have 3 stacks of fire, or 12 stacks of fire, have been crit 3 times, and then I move to the next target. And then I rinse and repeat that. And that allows me like a force multiplier here. I'm no longer even worried about that first target. He is mathematically dead within 3 seconds. I'm on to the 4th target beyond that. And yeah, like that sort of stuff is multiplying player power, more or less multiplying the sort of action economy that the players have, allowing them to do much more than they would be able to otherwise, because they can simply put a little bit of damage over time on a few enemies, and then you are assured they're dead, you move on, and you focus on something else. And so I would probably take a look at capping damage over time effects in Havoc or something like that, where it's, the world's your playground, or maybe even neutering them such they can only deal 50% of the damage they do before, and that will get you a better look at what the power level of these classes is underneath all this, without the lingering damage of fire being spread on everything, without Soul Blaze cooking like everything in the entire arena. What power do these classes have like straight up front in terms of their ability to blast and stuff? And that'll get you a better look at how many enemies you need to be distributing to combat them reasonably, because that's the ultimate goal here, right? Is we want to step down player power, and we want to figure out exactly how powerful players are as a result, and then we want to dial in the enemies to perfectly match that, to be their equal, so that they are like getting a good amount of wins and a good amount of losses, and keeping it fresh. And that's the whole game, right? It's just keeping that balance. So those are my couple of ideas. Jot your ideas down below, guys. Now, I'll revisit this and have more videos in the future if fatshark continues down their warpath, their conquest to stop the slop, and hopefully you sign on to the Stop the Slop petition. That's not real. Don't look for it. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate you hanging out with me. If you made it this far, you're truly a legend. I love you. I'll see you next time. Mystery out. Bye-bye.